Jason Statham stared at the rowdy crowd, willing his heartbeat into a steady rhythm. He was no stranger to noise or aggression. He had faced far worse in film shoots and real-life encounters on London's rougher streets. But tonight, the stakes felt different. This was not about a scripted fight scene meticulously choreographed by a stunt team. This was about respect, his own, and the respect he owed to the world of martial arts. The bright lights of the MMA arena shone down on him, revealing every bead of sweat, every tense muscle. Off to the side, he could hear the cocky mockery from an up-and-coming fighter, Ben Havoc Henley, who was warming up in the ring with exaggerated flamboyance. Ben's taunts sailed through the air, resonating through the crowd with a confidence that teetered on arrogance. "Hey, Jason, you sure you want to be here, old man?" Ben shouted, leaning over the top rope with a grin that spelled trouble. "You can't hide behind your camera crew tonight." Heads turned. At first, a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd, then an uneasy hush. No one spoke to Jason Statham like that unless they had a death wish or at least nerves of steel. But Ben had neither caution nor humility. He saw Jason as a stepping stone, an opportunity to shine at Jason's expense. If he could embarrass a Hollywood action star with well-documented martial arts skills, that would be his path to MMA fame. He was brimming with raw talent, confidence, and a dash of showmanship. For better or worse, he knew exactly how to stoke a fire. Jason's eyes narrowed, but a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It wasn't the kind of smile that signaled amusement. Rather, it was the dangerous calm of a man who'd spent years pushing his body beyond its limits. A man well acquainted with real fighting, not just the choreographed illusions. One who had trained in multiple disciplines, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, and his beloved Wing Chun. On his bumpy journey from street hustle to international film stardom, he had learned the difference between fake bravado and genuine skill. Right now, he was certain this kid, brash and reckless, had some skill to back up his trash talk, but not enough wisdom. Media cameras and cell phones recorded the scene. It was supposed to be a promotional event for a new action movie Jason was supporting and a charity match supporting wounded veterans. Jason had been invited to demonstrate a few moves, talk about discipline in combat sports, and promote MMA's growing popularity worldwide. But somewhere along the line, the young fighter had decided to make a name for himself by singling out the biggest star in the building. The tension was palpable, an electric current zigzagging through the stands. "Do you really think you can handle me?" Jason finally responded, his voice low and measured. Every microphone in the arena seemed to angle in closer, hungry for drama. Ben hopped off the ropes and smirked. "I've seen your movies. That's all you got, movies." He strutted around the ring like he owned it. "Here's the real fight world," he added, slapping his chest. "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you." There was a moment where everyone expected Jason to retort with an equally cutting line, something savage to put the younger fighter in his place. Instead, Jason shrugged, as though unconcerned by the taunts. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," he said, scanning the crowd. "I'm here to support the sport, support the men and women who train hard every day, put their health on the line, and represent discipline. This event is for a good cause. Let's keep it respectful." Ben made a loud, mocking awe sound and pretended to wipe a tear. "That's sweet. But come on, old man, don't give me that good sport routine. You might think you're giving me a lecture." He pointed at Jason theatrically, "but all I'm hearing is you backing down. You know you don't belong in here with real fighters." A hush spread throughout the seats. It was the same hush that accompanies a collective thought. "Wow, that was too far." People began murmuring among themselves. Some booed Ben's antics, while others wondered if Jason would lose his cool. But the veteran star hardly twitched. His eyes remained locked on Ben, his posture unwavering. A few MMA pros in attendance watched with keen interest. They knew Jason's reputation. He wasn't just some actor who learned a few neat tricks for the screen. He was a real athlete. While it was certainly risky to go toe-to-toe with an active competitor half a generation younger, Jason had proven more than once he wasn't one to roll over for a bully. Whether or not he would actually fight, and how that fight might end, was the question gripping everyone. Ben stepped toward the ring's edge once more, beckoning Jason in. "You're talking about respect," he sneered. "I think I'll take the respect after I knock that Hollywood grin off your face. Let's make it official. You and me, 1 round for the charity crowd." He turned to the promoter, pointed at Jason. "What do you say?" The promoter, sweaty and caught in the frenzy of potential headlines, hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan, but the crowd was clearly excited by the spectacle. Jason let the tension ride for a moment before he walked toward the ring steps. He looked out at the sea of phones capturing every second, then climbed between the ropes. "I have my reservations," Jason said calmly, removing his jacket. "But if it's a demonstration you want, I'm not going to run." Ben's expression brightened with predatory glee. The tables were set for a confrontation the audience would never forget. And behind all that excitement, behind those blinding lights and the roar of the crowd, was a quiet sense of foreboding. Jason Statham might just be about to show this cocky fighter exactly what he'd been missing. The roar of the arena reached a crescendo as Jason stood in the center, toes on the edge of the mat. He felt that familiar prick of adrenaline tingling at the base of his neck. It had been a while since he'd engaged in any form of live sparring in front of a crowd. Sure, he'd done stunts and choreographed sequences for big-budget films, but those were controlled environments. This was raw, unscripted, 1,000 eyes watching, waiting for sparks to fly. Across from him, Ben Havoc, Henley exuded an irrepressible energy. Despite the slight height difference favoring the younger fighter, Jason was calm. Age had given him not just knowledge, but a deeper sense of poise under pressure. He stretched his arms overhead, working out the kinks, noticing how each small move caused the crowd to go wild. The promoter rushed forward, holding a mic. His eyes flickered with the excitement of a man who just realized he'd found PR gold. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began breathlessly, "tonight we have an unscheduled exhibition bout." The crowd cheered, cell phones raised high, capturing every word. In the red corner, the rising star of the MMA world, Ben Havoc Henley. More cheers, though a smattering of boos emerged. And in the blue corner, the promoter continued dramatically, action star and dedicated martial artist, Jason Statham. An uproar. The building practically shook. Jason tilted his head and eyed Ben, who was already bouncing on the balls of his feet. Yes, the younger man had speed, probably fresh angles of attack. Jason couldn't afford to rely on flashy moves or big leaps. His game, if he played it right, would revolve around patience and precision. That's how you handle a younger, faster opponent. Ben wore a grin as though he'd just been handed a lollipop. He circled, fists up, making a show of flexing his muscles and throwing quick jabs in the air. Jason let him have his theater. The less he responded, the more Ben would reveal about his own approach. The boisterous were often the easiest to read. A sudden hush fell over the crowd, a hush that always precedes an explosion. The arena's announcer lowered his voice. "Ready, fight!" Ben moved first, darting in with a crisp 1-2 combination. Jason, reading the telegraph motion, slid back just enough to evade the punches. He didn't bother throwing a counter-strike yet. He wanted to see how reckless this fighter would be. Then, undeterred, threw a swift head kick. The crowd gasped. It was a sharp textbook move. Jason blocked with a high guard, feeling the impact reverberate through his forearms. But he stayed grounded, unshaken. He recognized the hallmark of a brash fighter. They come out strong, hoping to set the pace and enforce their dominance. Right now, Ben was playing that card with gusto. But when the initial excitement wore off, that's when holes often appeared. Jason pivoted to the right, measured the distance, then delivered a quick front push kick that found Ben's midsection. It wasn't devastating. Jason held back on power, but it was enough to cause Ben to stumble. The crowd rumbled with excitement. Ben's confidence deflated momentarily, replaced by a flicker of surprise. A hush, a blink, then it was replaced again by anger. He pressed the attack even harder. Punches whizzed by. Jabs, hooks, the occasional knee. Jason bobbed and weaved, blocking, keeping his guard high. He could sense the disbelief in the crowd. Perhaps they had expected some comedic mismatch, the movie star to fold quickly. Instead, it was Ben's frustration that grew. A minute into the round, Jason found an opening. Ben overcommit on a wild hook. Swiftly, Jason stepped in, leveraged his hips, and sent a low leg kick to the outer thigh. Ben stumbled, wincing. Jason followed with a short elbow strike that tapped the side of Ben's headgear. Controlled. Measured. The crowd exploded once more, and though the strike was intentionally light, it rattled Ben's sense of invulnerability. The younger man retreated a step, blinking away the reality check. Now, the audience saw him for what he was, talented but raw. Ben was no pushover, but he hadn't faced many calculated veterans. Jason kept to the center, face neutral. He didn't feed off the crowd's cheers. Instead, he watched every shift of Ben's weight, ready for the next flurry. Ben regrouped, wiping sweat from his brow. "That all you got?" he spat, desperation edging his voice. He lunged in with a reckless combination, launching a looping overhand right that had knockout intentions. That was a mistake. Jason ducked beneath a wild punch, slid forward, and performed a takedown with an effortless hip toss. The crowd was on its feet, shouting and clapping in disbelief and awe. Ben landed on the mat with a heavy thud. For a second, the younger fighter lay there, shock painted across his face. Jason lingered above him, arms coiled, prepared to follow up if needed. But he refrained from punishing him further. In a real MMA match, any fighter with an advantage might go for ground and pound. But this was an exhibition, and Jason had made a promise to himself. He would stay respectful, not break the kid's spirit or bones. This wasn't about humiliating anyone. Ben scrambled to his feet, face contorted with embarrassment. Now, the adrenaline coursed through him in a different way. He was no longer giddy. He was furious. Perhaps humiliated in front of thousands, scorned by the cameras. And fury, Jason knew, was a double-edged sword. Anger could fuel explosive power, but also dulled strategy. The two circled again. This time, Ben was more hesitant, shoulders hunched. He fired a few jabs, but they were half-committed. Jason deftly deflected. Sensing the momentum shift, the crowd began chanting, "Statham! Statham!" A chant that grew in waves, overshadowing everything else. The round was winding down, and Jason decided to show one last bit of skill. He feinted low, drawing Ben's guard downward, then snapped a precise sidekick to Ben's upper arm, just enough force to spin the younger fighter sideways. The referee stepped in, arms raised to pause the action. The bell rang, ending the round. Jason lowered his guard, breathing steady. A few superficial bruises stung here and there, but he was otherwise fine. Ben, on the other hand, looked disheveled. Sweat trickled down his forehead, and his expression was a tumult of confusion, anger, and fleeting respect. The crowd erupted in applause. This little exhibition was shaping up to be far more intense than anyone had expected. Cameras flashed. Fans screamed for both fighters. "I'm just getting started," Ben muttered, glaring at Jason. Jason gave him a nod. He respected the grit, even if Ben had gone about it the wrong way. The younger fighter was learning a harsh lesson. The man in front of him was not a puppet on strings, not some aging actor who'd forgotten how to fight. He was a seasoned martial artist, unshaken by intimidation or bright lights. What no one realized yet, least of all Ben, was how truly surprising Jason's next move would be. The crowd's roars, the promoter's grin, and the momentary breathers between rounds were all pieces of a bigger puzzle. Something was brewing in Jason Statham's mind, something that would leave not just Ben, but the entire arena in absolute shock. Between rounds, the ring corner was a whirl of activity. People in headsets scrambled to figure out if they should let the fight continue. Trainers rushed in with water bottles, towels, and urgent advice. It was, after all, an exhibition match for charity. No one wanted it spiraling out of control or ending in a serious injury. But the atmosphere was electric. The fans loved it, the cameras were rolling, and there was no doubt this scuffle had overshadowed the entire night's schedule. Nobody dared to pull the plug yet. Jason stood in his corner, wearing that same calm, focused expression. He rolled his shoulders to keep them loose, breathing deeply. A random staff member approached, dabbing at a small cut on his forehead. He hadn't even noticed it. The staffer seemed a bit starstruck, trembling with excitement. "You're doing great, Mr. Statham," she mumbled wide-eyed. "Thank you," he replied, polite even in the heat of it all. He peered across the ring to see Ben pacing like a caged lion, fuming but simultaneously rattled. The younger fighter's coach was in his ear, presumably telling him to calm down and fight smart. But from his body language, it was clear Ben was letting his emotions run the show. The second round bell sounded. The referee nodded for them to continue. The noise level rose once more as the crowd prepared for another round of fireworks. Jason advanced first this time, wanting to test how Ben would react. He flicked out a probing jab. Ben dodged, returning fire with a sharp, low kick. Jason checked it, stepping back. They danced around each other, the footwork reminiscent of two prowling animals, one disciplined, the other unpredictable. Suddenly, Ben lunged forward, aiming for a double-leg takedown. He wrapped his arms around Jason's waist and tried to drive him to the mat. For a moment, Jason wobbled as he struggled against Ben's raw strength, but managed to regain his balance. He sprawled, hooking one arm under Ben's shoulder. They grappled, bodies locked. The entire arena stood on its tiptoes, anticipating a scramble on the canvas. Breathing heavily, Ben exerted a powerful effort to lift Jason and slam him. Jason responded by shifting his hips, distributing his weight perfectly, making it incredibly tough for Ben to get him airborne. Then, in a flash of technical skill, Jason hooked Ben's leg, twisted his body, and brought Ben down instead. The two hit the ground with a thud, but Jason landed in top control. He pressed down, controlling Ben's wrists. The younger fighter resisted, bridging his hips, trying to find an escape. This was the wrestling side of MMA, messy, exhausting, and the ultimate test of who truly controlled the fight. Jason calmly shifted his weight, inching toward a more dominant position. Ben bucked, face red from exertion, veins bulging in his neck. He managed to slip an arm free and threw a wild elbow from the bottom. Jason leaned back in time, preventing a solid hit. But that reckless elbow ended up scraping the side of Jason's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. The crowd let out a collective gasp. Jason grimaced but stayed composed, pinning the offending arm to the mat. He briefly locked eyes with Ben, seeing desperation mixed with an odd flicker of pride in those young eyes. This was a dangerous moment. The fighter on the bottom was cornered and might lash out with anything. But Jason's experience prevailed. He maneuvered for an arm triangle choke, a move that could force a swift tap if done right. Before he could fully secure it, Ben twisted and freed himself in a scramble, slipping away like an eel. He popped back to his feet, chest heaving. The crowd roared, loving the drama. Not many had expected this level of intensity from a charity exhibition. Jason rose more cautiously, gauging how fatigued Ben might be. The younger fighter's stance had changed. Less cocky, more guarded. Tiny glimmers of respect, perhaps. Or maybe just survival instincts. They exchanged strikes again. A jab here, a low kick there. Neither man landed anything too significant, each testing the other's reflexes. Inside the ring, seconds could feel like minutes. Time stretched out. Jason spotted another opportunity. Ben's left hand dropped slightly whenever he threw a kick. It was a small detail, but significant. If he timed it perfectly, he could land a hook or a cross right through that opening. He waited. Ben, still fueled by emotion, telegraphed another kick. Jason moved in, except at that exact moment Ben feinted. He had recognized his own pattern and adapted. He snapped a lightning-fast jab that grazed Jason's jaw. Not a major blow, but enough to jolt him. The crowd cheered for Ben's cunning move, the younger fighter letting out a triumphant roar. Maybe he was more adaptable than Jason gave him credit for. They locked up again near the ropes. With a grunt, Ben shoved Jason back, creating distance, and launched a knee. Jason twisted his torso, absorbing the impact on his side. Pain radiated, but he refused to yield ground. He returned the favor with a short elbow that connected to Ben's shoulder. Less damaging than intended, but a clear message that he wouldn't be bullied. It was then that an idea, unexpected and audacious, crystallized in Jason's mind. He could feel how the crowd was feeding off every exchange, how the tension had turned a friendly exhibition into something raw and primal. If he stayed on this track, the confrontation might reach a brutal climax. Either he'd have to knock Ben out or risk a serious blow himself. But that wasn't what he wanted. This was meant to be a demonstration of skill, a display of martial arts principles for charity. He found himself thinking, what if there's a way to walk this line without caving to macho posturing and still leave the entire arena speechless? Just then, the bell signaled the end of the second round. Jason stepped back, raising his arms slightly in defense until the referee separated them fully. Sweat ran in rivulets down his face, soaking his shirt. Ben stood there, breathing hard, eyes filled with conflict. He was beginning to see the gap in experience, but he'd probably never admit that. Instead, he'd keep throwing everything he had into the fight. Jason offered a brief nod, acknowledging Ben's resilience. But there was a flicker in Jason's gaze, a calm, hidden determination to do something truly unexpected. He wouldn't say it aloud, but he could feel the shape of the next few minutes forming in his mind. The question was, how would Ben respond? And how would the frenzied onlookers, cameras, and media react if Jason Statham took a path that defied their expectations? As he returned to his corner, Jason inhaled deeply, ignoring the dull ache pulsing along his side and arms. The crowd was chanting again, half for Jason, half for Ben. Amid the chaos, he sharpened his strategy, forging a response that would change the tone of this night entirely. One thing was certain. By the time the next round concluded, no one in the arena would see him, or the sport, in quite the same way again. The break before the third round was brief, but Jason's mind was racing. He replayed the last two rounds, dissecting every slip, strike, and near takedown. Ben was a fast learner, albeit fueled by aggression and vanity. That combination made him dangerous in short bursts, but it also made him impulsive, prone to errors if cornered. Up in the stands, fans of all stripes buzzed with excitement. Some were die-hard MMA enthusiasts, analyzing every angle. Others were casual watchers who came for the charity event and were now enthralled by the unexpected drama. The tension was thick enough to taste. The referee summoned both fighters back to the center of the ring. The third round would soon begin. Jason felt the crowd's eyes glued to him. He sensed their thirst for a climactic knockout, some final exclamation mark that would confirm Jason's prowess and show the upstart his place. But that wasn't Jason's endgame. Even though Ben had insulted him, tried to humiliate him, Jason understood that martial arts carried a deeper responsibility. He recalled a quiet conversation he once had with an old sensei who emphasized the importance of humility. The greatest display of skill, the sensei had said, is controlling yourself, not the opponent. Those words resonated now. Instead of beating the younger fighter into submission, perhaps Jason could show him, and everyone else, something more profound. The bell rang. Round 3. Ben came out swinging yet again, but his movements had lost some explosiveness. Fatigue was setting in, and the accumulation of strikes and grappling exchanges weighed on him. Jason saw an opening, a textbook opportunity to deliver a devastating cross. But instead of capitalizing, he circled away, letting Ben's punch slice the air. Ben narrowed his eyes, frustration building. He closed distance, throwing a series of body shots that Jason blocked. In a fluid motion, Jason trapped Ben's arm, pivoted, and set up a sweep that brought the younger man to his knees. The crowd erupted in applause and groans. Surely, this was it, the moment to unleash a finishing blow. But Jason stepped back, releasing Ben without delivering extra punishment. Perplexed, Ben rose, chest heaving. He looked at Jason with anger and confusion. "What's wrong with you?" "You had me," he spat, panting. Jason shrugged, adopting a neutral stance. "Show me your best," he said quietly. "I don't need to hurt you." The audience stilled momentarily, unsure how to interpret Jason's words. This wasn't the typical blood sport trash talk. Even the commentators, who were describing the action for a streaming audience, seemed momentarily taken aback. Ben, stung by what he perceived as condescension, roared and charged, launching a barrage of fists. Jason moved in a half-circle, absorbing some hits on his guard, dodging others. One punch slipped through and caught him on the cheek, snapping his head back. Pain flared, and the crowd gasped. Jason regained his footing, blinking away the sting. Desperation glimmered in Ben's eyes. He swung wildly, trying to capitalize on Jason's momentary daze. But that sliver of advantage evaporated as Jason's composure returned. With fluid timing, he blocked the next punch and countered with a single, precise elbow to Ben's upper arm, enough to numb it without causing severe damage. The younger fighter cursed, arm dropping. Jason pivoted again, turned a corner, and swept Ben's legs, placing him flat on his back in an instant. Another opening to finish. Another choice to walk away. Jason retreated, letting Ben stand. The crowd's roar was deafening, uncertain whether to cheer or boo. Some saw Jason's restraint as a mark of respect. Others wanted blood. The entire stadium was an arena of swirling emotions now. Even the referee looked uncertain, glancing at Jason. But Jason gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "Trust me." The official let them continue. Ben trembled from head to toe, adrenaline and exhaustion wrestling within him. His pride was battered almost as badly as his body. "Stop toying with me," he snapped, voice cracking. "Fight me for real." Jason exhaled slowly. "You'll thank me one day," he said, his tone earnest, almost fatherly. And then, with an unexpected grace, he dropped his guard entirely. Arms at his sides, feet set, eyes fixed calmly on Ben. A collective gasp swept across the venue. It was an absurd move in a fight. Dropping your guard was tantamount to begging for a knockout. But Jason stood there, unwavering, no hint of fear or showboating. He was offering Ben the chance to land a free shot if he so chose, and the entire stadium watched in stunned silence. Ben stared, chest heaving. "Are you insane?" Jason didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I'm just not here to destroy you." A beat passed, then another. Suddenly, Ben snarled and rushed forward. He cocked his fist back, fully intending to smash Jason's unguarded chin. Some spectators turned away, bracing for the terrible impact. The blow flew with lethal intent. Yet somehow, at the last millisecond, Jason shifted. He stepped off the center line, gliding around Ben like water around a rock. The punch whiffed the air, the momentum carrying Ben forward in an awkward stumble. Jason reached out and steadied him, preventing him from crashing face-first into the ropes. The quiet that followed was eerie, amplified by the weight of the moment. No one cheered. No one spoke. In that instant, the fight lost its savage edge. Ben spun around, face pale, realization dawning on him. Jason had outclassed him not just physically, but mentally. He had chosen to show mercy, no, more than mercy. He had chosen to demonstrate the essence of martial arts. Discipline, respect, self-control. Ben stood there, gasping, eyes darting between the stoic star and the roaring audience. This was not how fights typically ended. He looked undone, both humiliated and strangely enlightened. The referee called time, stepping between them, unsure how to proceed. In that timeless moment, Jason lifted a hand to the crowd as if to indicate the fight was over, not by knockout or submission, but by a deeper understanding reached. The stadium erupted, a cacophony of applause, cheers, and thunderous approval. This was not the savage finish some had anticipated, but it was more than a fight. It was a statement. Seeing the respect pouring forth, something inside Ben cracked. He sank to one knee, momentarily covering his face with his glove. Rage, shame, and grudging admiration simmered together. This man he had ridiculed so openly had bested him, and, in doing so, shown him a truth about humility and control that no knockout could teach. Jason extended a hand. Their gazes locked. Slowly, Ben reached up and took it. The crowd roared again, a sound that might have been heard in the farthest corners of the city. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every tremor in Ben's face and every drop of sweat on Jason's brow. "Good fight," Jason said softly. Ben nodded, swallowing hard. He murmured something, but it was lost in the din. Still, the look on his face said enough. He understood now that being a warrior wasn't just about throwing punches. It was about heart, respect, and a level of discipline few possessed. Everyone thought that was the end of it, the final note in an extraordinary exhibition. But unbeknownst to all, Jason had one more surprise planned, something that would etch this night into MMA lore for years to come. With the tension of the brawl still hanging in the air, Jason guided Ben to his corner, where the younger fighter's coach and the ringside medics rushed to check him. Fans were going berserk, clapping and chanting Jason's name. Yet Jason could sense a shift in the energy, a mixture of awe for his skill and confusion at how the fight had concluded. The result was not a knockout or submission, and it hadn't gone to the judges. It was a spectacle that ended on a note of sportsmanship rather than bloodlust, and nobody quite knew how to categorize it. The ring announcer cleared his throat, stepping to the center. "Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our exhibition match," he boomed, still rattled by the unexpected outcome. "Let's hear it for both fighters, Ben Havoc Henley and Jason Statham." A wave of thunderous applause washed over them. Jason shook the announcer's hand, then turned to Ben. The younger man stood hunched, eyes still burning with leftover adrenaline, a swirl of conflicting emotions. But there was a hint of respect in his nod to Jason. The tension that had been there from the start seemed to dissipate, replaced by a silent acknowledgement. "I see what you did. Thank you." But Jason wasn't done. He nudged the announcer aside politely and took the mic, looking out over the sea of faces. The overhead lights cast a harsh glow, illuminating streaks of blood and sweat on his face, evidence of the rawness of the scuffle. Cameras flashed like lightning in a summer storm. "Tonight," Jason began, his voice reverberating around the arena, "I came here to support a charity, to promote a sport that I've held dear for a long time. MMA is about more than violence. It's about honing your mind, body, and spirit." He paused, glancing toward Ben. "In that ring, we put our pride on the line. We test ourselves. But sometimes the biggest challenge is learning to control our power, not to unleash it without restraint." The crowd grew quiet, hanging on each word. Jason pointed to Ben. "This man right here, he's tough, he's determined, and he has the potential to go far in this sport. Don't doubt it for a second. And if you think that I didn't fight him for real, trust me, he gave me everything I could handle. I only hope tonight was a lesson for both of us." Ben's eyes glistened, not quite tears, but close. The audience murmured in surprise at the graciousness. Here was Jason Statham, an international superstar, praising a fighter who had mocked him so viciously just minutes ago. It was the kind of narrative twist that no scriptwriter would have dared to imagine, precisely because it was so counterintuitive. Who, after being humiliated, would then extend a hand of admiration? Yet that's what Jason was doing. "And now," Jason said, voice resonating with excitement, "I want to show my respect to the MMA community in a more permanent way." He signaled to the promoter, who brought out a small velvet box. "I'm donating something meaningful to tonight's auction for charity." "This watch," he continued, opening the box to reveal a sleek, diamond-accented timepiece, "was gifted to me by a dear friend when I booked my first major film. It's always reminded me of how far I've come. Now, I wanted to remind someone else that dreams can be achieved when you believe and work for them." Applause swelled, accompanied by whistles and cheers. No one had anticipated such an offering. Beyond that, the significance of it was unmistakable. It was a personal memento, not just a piece of flashy jewelry. Jason had chosen this very public stage to give it up for a cause bigger than any one person. The entire stadium seemed to hold its breath in collective gratitude. As the promoter took the watch, cameras zoomed in, capturing the symbolic handover. The announcer, quick on his feet, piped up, "Bidding for this incredible piece of memorabilia will start immediately, with all proceeds supporting our veterans." The crowd roared. A swirl of excitement erupted in the stands, people calling out bids, sponsors conferring with their managers. The adrenaline that had fueled the fight now morphed into philanthropic fervor. Money was raised, hearts were moved. The friction of the confrontation had transformed into a unifying moment of generosity. Still, Jason had one more card to play. He handed the mic back to the announcer and beckoned for Ben to come closer. The younger fighter approached warily, uncertain what to expect. Jason removed his gloves and extended an open hand. Ben stared, then clasped it. The crowd, sensing another moment, quieted. "You've got a real future," Jason said, voice low but audible in the hush. "Train hard, keep that spirit, but remember, pride alone can break you." He gave Ben's hand a gentle squeeze. "Come see me in Los Angeles sometime. I've got connections that might help you get the right training, the right fight opportunities. No strings attached." Ben's jaw dropped. It was an offer of mentorship, or at least a door open to new possibilities. Cameras flashed rapidly, capturing the look of stunned gratitude that spread across Ben's bruised face. The same mouth that had been hurling insults just hours earlier now formed an expression of humble acceptance. Thank you," he said, voice catching in his throat. I don't know what to say." The audience erupted in applause, some even standing in ovation. The gesture was not just unexpected, it was transformative. In a world that often celebrates domination and retribution, Jason had chosen compassion and encouragement. The entire arena felt the gravity of that decision. It was a challenge to every assumption about how grudges should be settled and how respect should be earned. The night would be splashed across every sports headline. Jason Statham shocks arena with show of mercy and generosity. Fans would dissect every moment, from the early trash talk to the final handshake. Critics would question if it was staged, only to be silenced by the genuine rawness of it all. And for years, young fighters would look back on this evening as a testament to what martial arts could and should represent. In the aftermath, as the crowd began dispersing and camera crews searched for interviews, Jason slipped away to a quiet corner of the dressing room corridor. His knuckles throbbed, and his ribs ached from the brutal body shots. Yet a deep calm filled him. The lesson he had once learned from his sensei was alive and well. True strength is measured not by how you dominate, but by how you choose to wield it. A few moments later, he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Ben, ice pack pressed to his jaw, eyes still reflecting humility. "Thank you," the younger fighter said more clearly this time. I owe you more than I can say." Jason offered a small smile. "Just use what you learned here, and you'll have repaid me more than enough." He paused, thinking of the watch, the charitable funds it would bring, the veterans who would benefit. This entire night had been about second chances for both of them. "I'll see you again," he said, clasping Ben's shoulder. "And next time, I expect you to take it to me even harder, but do it with respect, yeah?" Ben cracked a wry grin despite the pain. "You got it, man.